Do you know the name Louis Zamperini? I bring this up because I think a lot of Americans they may not know the name right off the tops of their heads, but they might remember his story. There was a book and then a movie called I think it was Unbroken, and he had been a track star in the 1930s, and World War II broke out. He ended up flying out over the Pacific, ended up crash landing a plane that he was in, spent a month and a half at sea floating around, and finally managed to get himself to the Marshall Islands, where he was then captured by the Japanese. Out of the frying pan into the fire, he spent a number of years in captivity, frequently being tortured before he was finally released. And he was a very troubled soul after what he had gone through. Then in the late 1940s, he ended up going into a Billy Graham revival, and it was a transformative experience for Zamperini. And he recommitted himself to Christ. He became a counselor. He counseled troubled youth and became a very well known individual in the Christian community and very successful too, as well. Before he died in June of 2014. Zamperini had been asked some questions by a reporter about what he expected for the United States in the future, and he said, China's going to eat our lunch. Now, this was a guy who had survived a Japanese prison camp and saw his country win the greatest war ever fought, certainly the most violent and bloody. But he said there's simply no way this country can come out from under the mountain of debt that it has, which was $17 trillion at the time that he died, maybe some spare change atop that, too. It brings up a few points since we are now approaching $30 trillion in debt. And I have to admit, we have a president who has been party to the growth in that debt. He's a Republican, but still, Republicans haven't been a whole heck of a lot better. On the other hand, had Hillary Clinton been president the last 4 years, well, you would not have had the deregulation that has taken place during the Trump era. President Trump has worked diligently to take regulations off business in this country in hopes that generating business, generating tax revenue would help offset some of the damage when it comes to our yearly deficit spending. So, to some degree, that's been a success. According to media and all of the conventional wisdom, Donald Trump's time in Washington is coming to an end shortly. And we'll have Democrats controlling all of Capitol Hill. The media says they'll be picking up the Senate, they'll take the White House, and then we're going to have the Green New Deal, which has a price tag anywhere from 50 to 90 trillion dollars, which just simply these are astronomical figures. They're going to be printing up money like it's monopoly money, which will devalue currency. But eventually, the rest of the world will not buy our debt. It will be seen as a bad bet. And when that happens, there won't be money for Social Security, Medicare or Medicaid. There won't be money for tanks and planes and ships. And you're going to find that you have a greatly reduced lifestyle or standard of living. That's really what's going to happen. People like to say, well, how come you can't give us any good news? I don't know. Do you like being lied to? Or do you like the truth? Which one helps you better prepare for the future? You've got a lot of Americans out there who say, I'm not worried. The number of Americans who actually think they're going to win the lottery is astronomically high. That tells you that a lot of people just aren't living with reality. And even if you were to win and you thought that was going to buy you a little grace if things collapsed around you, remember, a lot of hungry people know that you're sitting atop a stack of money. As one lottery winner, I remember reading a story about 30 years ago in a newspaper where a woman from New Jersey, her family had won $11 million in the lottery. And she said, people think you're walking around with it in your wallet and that it's not, it was an annuity and it was just paying off a certain sum every year to the family. And that's how they had chosen to take the money. Plus there are taxes and the like that are subtracted from all of that. But it just shows you the difficult time people have with numbers, putting their head around big numbers. And so when you talk $11 million in the lottery versus $30 trillion in debt, yeah, again, it's just something that people can't get their heads around. Even those of us who have spent a little bit of time trying to figure it out. And I was sitting on my birthday yesterday at home. I decided to order out for pizza and watch some of my favorite movies. I was sitting there thinking about, I was 58 yesterday and I'm now in my 59th year, I guess, technically, but I was thinking about when I was a kid and what a different country it was. No, you didn't have an internet. We didn't have cable TV. Telephones were rotary dial. Dad, well, mom took a lot of time off from work to raise three kids. Dad sometimes worked two jobs and maybe even a third on weekends, but he always had a new car every couple of years. On parade days, he would take us downtown. Downtown was a beautiful sight. Brick Main Street. I'm talking not only brick. buildings. But when I was actually very small, the street itself was made from red brick. It was a beautiful sight. And I can remember all of the old World War II and Korean War veterans that knew my dad would come by and they would chat with him. And they would tell my dad that my brother and I, is it my brother and me? Help me out here with my grammar. Please leave something in the comment section below. That we look like my grandfather Gordon. My brother actually did very, very much. And they would talk and they would chat and they would tell my dad that, that he was raising two respectful children. I guess they didn't always know a whole heck of a lot about what was going on in our household. But still, my dad was a patriotic flag waving guy when he was living alone in his latter years. He put up a giant flagpole outside and he wanted to fly the flag 24/7. So you know what he did? He put a spotlight on it too. That way he could constantly 24/7 fly the flag because he really believed in that. And growing up as a kid, I thought that I'd look at that flag and think that other countries must be jealous of us because it was such a beautiful flag. And you knew that everybody in the world wanted to live here. Many of them still do, although I'm sure they don't want a share of that debt. But we are living in the best I can say is borrowed time. We're living in borrowed time because it is going to come due, and it may come due. It's like the story from the Bible. There are a lot of parables, but like a thief in the night, we don't really know when it's going to come, but it's going to come. Could come tomorrow. Somebody's going to stop buying the debt eventually. It could come next year. It could come 5 years from now. But it is going to greatly rock our lives. The question is, are you prepared for it? It may be frightening, but you've got to be making some sort of plan. I mean, how are you going to get through all of this? What are your expectations? I guess that's the thing that I'm asking. We are looking at a perpetual winter, and I'm not talking in a literal sense. I'm talking in a figurative sense. But we may never have those warm parade days again. Bill Colley with you on Boardwalk Potatoes. If you like our videos, please click on the subscribe button above. If you've got any questions or comments, put them in the comments section below.